to 2000s Childhood Pop. My name is Mr. 96. One of the things I love about this series is that I get to talk about a variety of popular songs from back in the 2000s, which is now a retro era. It didn't hit me how retro the 2000s were until I recently did a class presentation on Danny California and realized it's 17 years old. Hell, most of my classmates were probably babies in 2006. For some perspective, I heard it from Rock Band 2 in 2008 when it was one of the relatively newer Chili Peppers songs, so Danny California is the same age now as Give It Away was back in 2008. Hell, I bet kids today have no idea what Rock Band is. But today I'm going to look at a song from 2006 that's not a rock song, though it came from a rock band member. Let me explain.
Let's go!
I'm sure you recognize this beat, right? No? Well, maybe you'll remember the chorus.
This is 10% luck, 20% skill, 15% concentrated power of will.
Now that should jog your memory. This song was suggested to me by Canubo on Patreon. If you want to know how to suggest and vote on songs for me to review, stay tuned until the end of the video.
When this began, I had nothing to say, and I'd get lost in the nothingness inside of me.
For those who don't know, Fort Minor is a hip-hop side project from Linkin Park's lead rapper and keyboardist Mike Shinoda. Don't let the project name fool you, as Fort Minor is not a hip-hop group or collective. For a while, I thought Fort Minor was a group like D12 or G-Unit, seeing as other people were on his signature track, but no, Fort Minor is just Mike. It's merely a name to distinguish himself from his Linkin Park activities. Makes sense. When you develop a brand, people start to have a perception of your name. That's why my Reddit account has no connection to Mr. 96. Anyways, last year I reviewed a Linkin Park song for the show, so when Remember the Name made the poll to potentially become a song I'd review, I knew this would be special because I love Linkin Park. However, my In the End episode took over 5 months to write because the weight of their legacy was such a heavy burden that nothing I wrote felt good enough. With this video though, Fort Minor only had one album, so it's much less of a challenge to write. Usually, I'm not an album listener, but considering how this is literally the only record Mike released, I decided to listen to the whole thing on a car ride one day. Overall, I'd say it was a really good listen, but it's kind of hard to evaluate in a single sentence, so I'm gonna have to show you what I mean. It's late 2005. Linkin Park is coming off 2 successful albums as well as a monumental collaboration album with Jay-Z, and lead rapper Mike Shinoda drops the debut single of his own upcoming rap album. Let's hear it.
It's like this, yo. This is 10% luck, 20% skill, 15% concentrated power of will, 5% pleasure, 50% pain, and 100% reason to remember the name.
These lines have had a life of their own. Even if you haven't listened to this song in years, those specific proportions just ring a bell in your head. This is 10% luck, 20% skill, 15% concentrated power of will, 5% pleasure, 50% pain, and 100% reason to remember the name. It all makes sense. As a kid, the mathematician in me was like, whoa, the percentages match perfectly, and then there's another 100%. That's like 200%. Apparently, Mike's son thought so too, but metaphorically, I like what these percentages represent. 50% pain? Makes sense. Showbiz sucks. 20% skill? A decent amount, but not the decider. 5% pleasure? Probably. 10% luck? I would have assumed it was higher, but it's the remaining 15% that puts it into perspective.
He doesn't need his name up in lights, he just wants to be heard, whether it's the beat of the mic.
As a kid, I had no idea what concentrated power of will meant, which was why that was the part of the hook I often flubbed. But as an adult, willpower makes sense as it's essentially the insane tolerance you have to possess to go through such a bullshit process. Making a name for yourself in the entertainment industry is fucking brutal. And to show that, let's talk about the guest artists on the track.
And now it all unfolds, the skill of an artist. This is 20% skill, 80% fear.
The other rappers on this track are Tak and Ryu of the underground LA group Styles of Beyond. Ryu in particular was friends with Mike growing up, so Mike approached them to help him write some songs. Unfortunately, SOB is extremely hard to find information on because they are pretty damn obscure. If you look at their wiki page, it talks about a recent interview that Ryu did, but when I clicked on the source, Wikipedia said it was archived in 2013, and the actual page from a Linkin Park fan site didn't even list the fucking date. I had to read the actual interview to find contextual clues as to when this took place, and I was eventually able to piece together that this was 2009. When nobody's even bothered to edit a recent line on your wiki page in the decade since it was sourced, that sadly shows how little anybody cares. But then again, maybe there's a reason why no one has heard from them for about a decade, and it may also be the reason why Fort Minor and Styles of Beyond haven't collaborated since. I don't want to assert anything too crazy because there's so little information out there, but based on what I've read from official interviews, Styles of Beyond got fucked over by Warner Music Group. After working on The Rising Tide for 7 total songs, Styles of Beyond got signed to Mike's record label, Machine Shop Records, but that relationship did not work in the slightest as it essentially killed the band. Some fans claim Styles didn't receive royalties for additional sales once the song became a giant hit. Allegedly, Tak and Mike fell out and ended on terrible terms before Tak moved to Asia and essentially disappeared online. To be clear, I couldn't verify either of those claims. In any actual interview of Ryu I could find, the most he says about the Warner Bros. Situation is that he and everyone felt burnt out once Styles left in 2008. So even though they got the rights to their third album, Reseda Beach, they had no desire to finish and release it until 2012. If you ask me, I think the money allegations are absolutely true because I did find a 2019 podcast interview with Ryu and money did come up in the conversation about Fort Minor. Here's how he described his experience.
But most people don't see that, though, at the time, though. Like, they make, like, it's all about decisions you make when you're in that, too, that could benefit you in the long run.
Right, but that's the problem because when you do things from a friendship perspective, it kind of blinds your business sense because you're just doing shit as friends like you used to do.
Yeah.
But you're not even fully conscious of like your decisions and like how much money is at stake here. So that's what I'm saying. Like that's when shit gets complicated.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, when you say your friendship blinded you from the business side, you can tell there's a little bitterness there. And it's a shame they'll probably never work with Fort Minor again because they are integral to this song and the album's sound. Like I said, I originally thought they were part of Mike's band or whatever because it's hard to imagine this as a Mike Shinoda solo track. I love the way the first 3 verses go Mike, Tak, then Ryu, but after the second chorus, the following verses go in reverse order with Ryu then Tak before capping it off with Mike. It's a clever way to have Styles of Beyond establish their presence while Mike bookends the verses and gives a final hook. Surprisingly enough though, Remember the Name was not the hit single from this record. While the song has been used for the 2007 NBA playoffs on TNT, as well as promos for the 2010 Karate Kid movie, Remember the Name surprisingly only peaked at number 66 on the Hot 100 in 2006. Which is weird considering it ended up becoming a platinum single in 2009 and 4 times platinum in 2018. Their actual biggest hit peaked at number 4, and it was not their next single, but the single after that, which we'll get to later, but first, let's back up a bit.
Now why is everybody so petrified? Petrified, step aside.
I mentioned Remember the Name being the debut single, but the song Petrified was also released as a single the same day. To use a modern equivalent, this dual release was like how Blackpink debuted with both Boombayah and Whistle at the exact same time. Petrified was a solo Mike track, but it's actually a damn good song. Though I'm guessing it probably didn't catch on as well since it has the vibe of an album track or opener. And sadly, rap songs in the mid-2000s had to have the catchy pop hooks to get big. The follow-up single after Remember the Name was a song called Believe Me that also featured Styles of Beyond, and it's pretty good, but it definitely sounds like a song of its time.
I guess that this is where we've come to. If you don't want to.
You can tell it was trying to be more radio-friendly with a melodic chorus, but I just feel the actual singing wasn't all that strong. It sounds too processed and layered for what should be a positive song. But enough stalling. The song of Fort Minor's that actually moved numbers and became a hit is one you might remember if you were there.
Where'd you go? I miss you so.
Where'd You Go is the only Fort Minor song to ever reach the top 40 of the Hot 100, peaking at number 4 in June of 2006. It's the song that brought Fort Minor to a mainstream audience, and it's absolutely splendid. Mike wrote this song from the perspective of someone whose significant other is always traveling or out of town, which is a topic I don't hear about often.
She said, some days I feel like shit, some days I wanna quit and just be normal for a bit.
It's interesting hearing this from Mike because he's the one that would be traveling constantly as a member of Linkin Park, so it's a neat peek into what Mike probably assumes his wife thinks of him.
I want you to know it's a little fucked up that I'm stuck here waiting, at times debating, telling you that I've had it with you and your career, me and the rest of the family here singing Where'd You Go?
It's self-awareness, but also self-loathing. There are many angles you can view this from because it can be about a family member who's in the army, a husband who's a professional athlete, a divorced ex who's not around the kids. Of course, it's more radio-friendly than Remember the Name since it has a hook from Holly Brooke, aka Skylar Grey, who would have a pretty damn successful career as a guest vocalist, but it's a very deserving hit that honestly isn't as remembered as it should be. And it's ironic because it was essentially the song that made Fort Minor a recognizable name.
Forget Mike, nobody really knows how or why he works so hard, it seems like he's never got time.
I mentioned how Remember the Name didn't chart very high. Well, it actually didn't chart at all in 2005, and the attention it got in 2006 was mostly because of Where'd You Go? Funny how legacies work. Normally this is where I'd stop with the album, but like Where'd You Go, there's one more song that has to be mentioned.
Right there, front page news, 3 weeks before 1942.
If you ask me what the best part of reviewing Fort Minor is, it's that I get to talk about a very special song known as Kenji. Mike said there were two songs that had to be on the album, Where'd You Go and Kenji.
Ken knew what it would lead to, just like he guessed. The president said the evil Japanese in our home country would be locked away.
I can't showcase as much here because you need the full song for context, but Kenji is a story song based on Mike Shinoda's grandfather, who was one of many Japanese Americans who were unjustly put in internment camps during World War II out of racist fear of the Japanese. In the song, Kenji had to be obedient for years out of fear for his and his family's lives, and when they were finally let go after the war, his neighborhood turned their backs on him and ostracized the family.
Ken got out big hopes of a normal life with his kids and his wife, but then they got back to their home and what they saw made him feel so alone. These people had trashed every room, smashed in the windows and bashed in the doors, written on the walls and the floor, Japs not welcome anymore.
While I may not be Japanese, this song hit me hard because Asian American hate is often swept under the rug, even to this day. Anti-Japanese sentiment was such an unnecessary evil that FDR didn't have to encourage, but he did. Let's be honest, white people prop up Asian Americans as a model minority as an excuse to put other minorities down, and other minorities take out their anger on us because they think our issues aren't as important as theirs. This is the kind of song that makes Mike Shinoda special. Asian American rappers aren't common, so these are issues you don't hear as often in hip-hop. Franklin Delano Roosevelt set back Asian American progress for many years, and people have ignored that fact for way too long. This is why Japanifornia in Ace Attorney is the good timeline. And that was Fort Minor's only album, The Rising Tide. After 2006, Mike released literally nothing until he suddenly dropped a new single 9 years later.
Welcome. Yeah, it's been a long minute. Let me break it down now if y'all still with it.
In 2015, Mike ended up releasing a new Fort Minor song called Welcome nearly a decade after Where'd You Go? It's essentially an update song about why he hadn't released any new material in all this time. Also, Ryu from Styles of Beyond happens to be in the video, but unfortunately Ryu is not in the song itself, even though he should have been. Yeah, Ryu sent Mike a verse as he thought he was going to be a part of it, which explains why he's in the video, but I guess Mike cut that part out for creative reasons. And honestly, that alone should shut down any possible hope that Mike and Styles will ever get back together for a Fort Minor project. This was Mike's comeback song after 9 years, and it's now been 8 years since that comeback. Allegedly, Mike had bigger plans for Fort Minor in 2017, but after Chester Bennington passed away, Mike has put all his energy into Linkin Park and what's next for the band, and honestly, I don't blame him. Plus, let's not forget that Linkin Park had been drifting towards a new musical style after Meteora anyways. In 2007, they released their third album, Minutes to Midnight, which was much more of an alt-rock record than nu metal, and since then, their music got more experimental before leaning in a more pop direction with One More Light. Mike Shinoda has stated that he doesn't want to return to nu metal with Linkin Park as it doesn't reflect who they are as artists today. And I can relate to that because you never want your creativity to stagnate. So in my opinion, I wouldn't be surprised if Fort Minor's a thing of the past because that's not who he is anymore. There's a chance Fort Minor may never come back, which is sad, but in a way, it makes the project a more fascinating relic of its era. This was an era when rap was creatively bankrupt and relied on catchy pop hooks, but Mike was able to make a record that demonstrated his creativity in a genre that didn't welcome him. Sure, some parts of the album sound dated to the mid-2000s, like the hook to Believe Me, and I'm not sure an exact repeat of this style would do well 20 years later, but it's a nice time capsule not only to music of that era, but also Mike Shinoda's younger days. This record has plenty of collaborations, including with Common in one of them, so it's a neat way for Mike to get his foot in the hip-hop door. It's like if Ed Sheeran's collaborations album were actually good. Remember the Name still holds up to this day, and that chorus will stand the test of time. If you're in the mood for some 2000s hip-hop, The Rising Tide is definitely a record I'd recommend. Once again, I want to thank Kenubo for suggesting this song, as it ended up being an appropriate spiritual successor to my Linkin Park review. If you also want to suggest 2000 songs for me to review, you can join my wonderful patrons on Patreon. For just $1 per video, you can join my patron-only Discord server where we chat and chill, and at $2 per video, you get to vote on what songs I review for my series 2000s Childhood Pop. At $5 per video, you get to be listed in my Names of Fame, and at $10 per video, you get a personal shout to the heart along with Jason Semler and Prideful Zella. For my patrons watching this around release, you can click the link below to help vote on what song I'll review for my next patron-voted 2000s Childhood Pop episode. Once again, I'm Mr. 96. If you want to see more pop reviews, click the subscribe button below and tap the bell to be notified when I drop a new episode. At the end of 2021, I said I wanted 2000s Childhood Pop to become my main series, but I failed to follow through with that promise in 2022. That changes this year. For the first time since 2019, I'm finally going to release more than 2 episodes a year, as my next video will be the third 2000 CP episode of 2023. Pop songs may come in numbers, but there's only one. 96.
너의 그 말 그 잔인한 말 가슴 아픈 말 칼날 같은 말 너의 그 말 그 잔인한 말날 울리는 말날 죽이는 말 Everybody breaking